I have been shooting with the Canon R5 Mark II now since launch day, and I have been super impressed with it. But what I've been more impressed with is actually RAW and sRAW. sRAW is the 4K RAW that you get out of it. I know there's complaints out there, people don't like it, but I feel like if you can handle it correctly in DaVinci Resolve, the color correcting, it is so much better than sLog2, and I love sLog2. But the thing that's been nagging at me is sRAW in 60 frames per second is so much sharper than sLog2 in 60 frames per second. And I've tried it in many different forms, and so I ended up calling Canon 3 weeks ago, and this is what happened.
For support with Cinema EOS products, please press 1.
Technical support for my Canon R5 II.
Thank you for calling Canon. This is, may I help you?
Yes, I had a question on my Canon R5 Mark II.
What was your question again?
If the Canon R5 Mark II in sRAW, which is the 4K RAW, sRAW 60 frames per second, is that oversampled or is that line skipping for resolution? I know in sLog2 and in other formats in non-RAW, it is line skipped.
Let me check another resource in this. Can I put you on hold for a moment?
Yep, sure.
Okay, sir.
Yes.
Thanks for holding. Sorry about that delay. So that's not published for some reason in the manual or in the specifications. So we don't have an answer for you.
Is there anybody in like the cinema end that would be able to know for sure?
I am cinema.
Oh, you are cinema. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And in your manual and from your experience, you don't even know if the sRAW is oversampled.
Yeah, we got the same manual that you have. We don't have a different manual.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not published there. I mean, I could send an email to an engineer and see what type of answer he'd give us. But I would think being that it can shoot 8K RAW, it may not need the oversample.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. 8K RAW 60 is obviously not oversampled. It's just 8K, and then you would downsample it in post. But the 4K 60 RAW is super sharp, which makes me think that it is oversampled. And RAW as a whole, even when it's, sRAW, 4K RAW, you would think it's using all the pixels because it's RAW of the 8K and just condensing it down. So I would have imagined that is why it looks sharper, but I kind of wanted just clarification for my own knowing.
So I can send an email to one of our engineers and ask him to give you a call back.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay, let me make sure I got your question right. You want to know, does 4K 60 frames per second sRAW oversample?
Correct.
Okay, I will send that question up and give you a call back once I get an answer.
Now, I thought this rep was never going to call me back because a few weeks went by, and just last week, he actually called me out of the blue, and his answer was a little shocking to me. Today is going to be an interesting day. We are going to be looking at 8K RAW in 60 frames per second. We are going to compare it to 4K RAW in 60 frames per second, and also look at sLog2 in 60 frames per second. And before I give you the answer to what that rep told me over the phone last week, I'm going to go over these scenarios. You can look at them for yourself. Then we're going to come back after we go outside and do those little tests because those are more broad. We're going to do a close-up test of my face, and I'm going to show you in DaVinci Resolve what that resolution looks like. So let's get to it. Okay, just remember, this is not scientific. Say it with me. It is Jared-tific. Yeah, that's right. And so just so you know what we're at right now, we're not doing 60 frames per second because this is just to set the scene, but we are in 8K RAW, 24 frames per second. It's RAW light. I'm gonna do this in RAW light with the 8K because my card in 60 frames per second on the regular RAW does not function properly. So it's still really good. The RAW light is awesome. And we are at 2.8. This is the 24-70, and I'm actually at 50 millimeters. ISO's 2000, using an ND filter by K&F Concept. It is a magnetic. Those are awesome. You can just, boom, take them out, put them on. It's really nice. And so this will be the scene. And you're wondering, Jared, is this gonna be an interesting scene? And I'm gonna say, yes, it is, because we have a swing. And it might be coming in like a wrecking ball, you know. I think that was a famous video or something. So maybe, we'll see. We'll see how that goes at 50 millimeters. 2.8 though, awesome lens. I know one of you made a comment in the video that you wanna sell, you know who you are, you wanna sell your Canon R6 II or R6 to get a 24-70. Well, this will give you an idea of what that looks like. So I wanna show you that there is a difference between regular RAW and small RAW. I know it's confusing, but small RAW is 4K RAW. Regular RAW is 8K RAW. So small RAW, but not RAW light, we'll do regular RAW. So you've got most of all that information right there. It's just not downsampled from the 8K sensor. It's line skipped. But I wanna give it the benefit of the doubt. I wanna give it as much detail as we can for the 4K 60 and then compare it to the 8K 60 downsampled and show that possibly the 8K 60 is the better route to go, because then you do have an oversampled 4K 60. You're just gonna have to shoot an 8K 60 to do that, but the image should be theoretically amazing. So let's go over to the 4K 60 and then we will, right after, do the 8K. So I'm gonna do a comparison pretty much around here. I'll even come close and you can see details, and I will be a wrecking ball.
What do I believe? What makes me feel it to write you this song? 2 hours a day, 5 months and a year. Oh, I loved you too long. You keep blowing me out, I keep holding you in. I keep asking myself, oh, why do you still hurt? Why do you still hurt? Who's wrong and who's right? I cannot decide, 'cause I'm sober tonight. I cannot escape. I'm here till it breaks. Oh, how my heart aches.
All right, let's go into DaVinci Resolve and take a look at what this really looks like close up. Okay, we are looking at these raw images of myself. This one actually is not raw. This is C-Log 2. And I just wanted to start from C-Log 2, then go and show you what raw light looks like, the sRAW light, that's the 4K raw light. Then the regular sRAW original, which is not light, so it has more data. And then the 8K raw light. And this will give you an idea. Now let's go without color grading. So nothing has touched these images, and especially in the raw end, there was nothing touching those. I didn't update it. There's no sharpening. So this is what this 4K looks like right there. This is as sharp as it's going to get. It is focused on my eyes, and we're zoomed in quite a bit. Now, I am going to show you the comparison to the 4K sRAW light. Now look at my eyes, and it's hard to tell, but they are sharper. C-Log 2, and here is the raw light. Look at the eyelashes. More defined, super sharp. No grading at all. Wasn't even put through the RAW converter. This is what it looks like out of camera. It is way sharper, just that. Now let's compare it to the non-light, the original 4K RAW. That is sharp. Where you're going to notice a difference though, when we do look at it a little bit closer as it is really in the colors and the artifacting, but it isn't even that much. C-Log 2. Standard RAW, 4K sRAW. Can you tell in YouTube world? Tell me if you can tell the difference, but it is vastly different. You should not shoot in C-Log 2 if you're doing 60 frames per second. It is not beneficial to you at all to do that. And now let's compare that to the 8K. Oh, look at that. I look doped up or something. But yeah, it looks very similar. Obviously, I can punch in a lot more, but it looks very similar to the 4K sRAW original. So now let's color grade this, and I can show you what it looks like across the board, color graded, and I will even take the sharpness all the way down after it's color graded. So let's go in there real quick. So we are in Camera Raw right now, and this is the 8K clip, and everything I do over here, I'm just going to bring it right over onto the other RAW clips, the sRAW original and the sRAW Lite. That's going to go there, and then the same editing on this end is going to be on the C-Log 2. And so right now, none of this has been touched, and by default, the sharpness is at 10. And just to show you that this doesn't make a huge difference, I'm going to bring it all the way down to 0 and show you that it is still sharper. So if you're new to this and you're in DaVinci Resolve and you're shooting RAW, you go to full res Canon, you go down to clip, and now all of this fills in. And this is where you can really change a lot. And so I'm not going to touch any of this right now. We'll touch it in a moment when I do the sharpness. But just by default, we're just going to leave all of that. And then we are going to go over, bring our transform there, our color transform. Whoops. And we are going to go to Canon, Cinema Gamut, changes the color a little bit right there. And then we are going to just mess with our curves. So obviously waveform is right here, and we're gonna adjust. So I'm not gonna do a crazy color grading at all, just so you have an idea. And I'm not touching any of the detail, none of the sharpening right there. Saturation, let's just crank it up right there. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to copy this setting, and I am going to apply it to everything, all the other clips. And then comparing the 8K to the sRAW original, see it down right here, it says sRAW standard. So it's not the light. So this is the 8K RAW light. We'll take that off, and it does look way over sharpened. I don't know if you can tell that at all. And we will take sharpness all the way down to 0. So there is no more sharpness on here. There's no fabrication to it. It is obviously, sharpness is completely taken out really out of the 8K. And I would say that it is very close, even zoomed in that much. And then comparing it to the sRAW light right here, let's get rid of this. Very similar. Now, check this out. Here is sRAW light, and we'll compare it to C-Log 2. Now watch. It gets so much fuzzier. It looks like it's out of focus completely. Like there's no focus to it at all. Go into this RAW and then just change it to, I don't know, even 4.5 right there. It brings in so much detail, and it doesn't do any kind of aliasing or anything horrible, whereas you would see aliasing at 10 in certain lines. This gets rid of all of that completely. And the colors in RAW are so much better than C-Log 2 in 60 frames per second. Again, this is standard sRAW. It is so sharp. See the movement right there? Even at 4.5 and not the default by 10, it is still really sharp. And if you were to go down to 1 or even 0, it still is a lot sharper than the sLog2. And by the way, this is no noise reduction at all. I did not even clean up noise or do any kind of chroma cleanup. This is exactly how the R5 II looks. It is really good. Now, as you saw in that close-up, the 8K RAW is absolutely amazing. It is super sharp. You can punch into it. And the 4K 60 sRAW in DaVinci Resolve, you take it from that 10 into the 0, it is still so much sharper than sLog2 in 60 frames per second. And that is where the biggest question comes in. Is this oversampled? Because even when you bring the sharpness all the way to 0 in sRAW 60, it is still super sharp and super clear with detail that you just don't get in sLog2. But this is the answer I got from the rep. When he called me back, he said he got an email from the engineer group, and they said it is not oversampled. It is line skipped for 60 frames per second in sRAW. That just shocks me. The sRAW 60 is line skipped, yet it's that sharp. Even when you unsharpen it in DaVinci Resolve, the details are even more there than sLog2. So this is my advice, and some people may disagree, but if you're gonna do 60 frames per second, do it in sRAW. sRAW 60 frames per second is so much more detailed. People will say there is just weird artifacting, and I think, this is my personal experience, I think that artifacting is coming if you shoot in raw light. If you do regular RAW in sRAW, which is, I know it's confusing, but the 60 frames per second full RAW in 60 frames per second for 4K, if you do that, I have seen way less artifacting and less issues. And now where those little zigzags come where people complain, I think if they're using DaVinci Resolve, they are leaving the default at the 10 sharp. Take that down to about 5 or below, even 0. It is still sharp and you're getting no aliasing artifacts anymore from that. And I've noticed that is way better to use than to do the 4K 60 in sLog2. Now, I like sLog2, but I am falling more and more in love with the regular RAW or the sRAW because what you can do in post is amazing. Now, the file size, huge, but in that case, if you're looking at the R5 II and you're like, whoa, I want this, you may want to consider, and I'm not saying I'd regret my purchase at all, but you may want to consider the R5C because of its raw capabilities, especially its 4K 60 is oversampled. But the benefit with the R5 II is that you actually have a back illuminated stacked sensor that does have less rolling shutter and some other awesome effects, especially if you're a photographer as well. With me, I'm a hybrid shooter. The eye retina autofocus is amazing. We haven't even touched those things yet. We're just touching video. And once we touch those and touch me, we're going to touch you right there in the heart. I think that's where the heart is. I'm not a biologist. Here's my future prediction that totally can be wrong, and I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'm going to hope a little bit. And that is that Canon does have the capabilities of doing an oversampled, and they will do in a future firmware, hopefully in the future, very near, that there will be 60 frames per second oversampled in 4K. Otherwise, the roundabout way is to shoot in 8K and then downsample it to 4K, and then you're going to get that ultra sample, super sharp. But here's to hoping that the next firmware will introduce 4K 60 oversampled in sLog2 and in RAW as well. If you appreciate everything I went through to speak with Canon and go through this long process, this wasn't an overnight video. This was a multi-week video that I've been working on. So if you appreciate that, please hit that thumbs up. It shows that I'm doing something right. And if you are new and you want to be part of the crazy train, well, the subscribe button is below. And there's going to be more videos with the R5 II because there are endless capabilities of this camera. It's just exciting. And of course, don't forget to watch some of these videos. I know you haven't watched them all. I've been watching you, not watching them all. So it's time for you to watch this one, or that one, or this one, or any of them. Just do it.